Hello everybody, and welcome back to Game Critiques. 2021 has finally come to a close, but before we move on to discussing the plethora of exciting titles coming in 2022, I'd like to look back at the great games I got to play last year. So today, I'll be going over what I believe to be the 10 greatest games that were released in 2021. Before I get started, I'd like to quickly bring up a few honorable mentions though. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Chicory: A Colorful Tale, Kena: Bridge of Spirits, WarioWare: Get It Together, Deathloop, Bravely Default 2, and Resident Evil Village are all great games that I'd recommend, and they were very nearly put on this list. However, there's a lot of steep competition this year, so not all of them can make the cut. I'd also like to quickly mention two games I've yet to play that I believe could have made this list: Death's Door and No More Heroes 3. Once I get around to those titles, I'll leave a pinned comment telling you guys what I thought about them. Now, let's get into the actual list. Number 10. Monster Hunter Rise. I've been playing Monster Hunter games for about a decade now, but I've always struggled to truly get into them. With each release, I got a little bit more hooked, but it never came anywhere close to what you see from most fans of the series. However, Monster Hunter Rise really did grab me for a good couple of months. I did burn out eventually, and I've barely touched it since April. I never even got to the required hunter rank for the latest monster added. But I still put well over 100 hours into this title, and I played it daily for a long time. Most prior Monster Hunter games feel clunky to play. Movement options are limited, and exploration is dull. This is where Rise vastly differs. The new wire bug mechanic is genius, essentially giving everyone grappling hooks that they can use at all times. Combine this with abilities like wall running and a shockingly great performance for a game like this on Switch, and you've got one of the best feeling action games I've played this year. Monster Hunter Rise also has great multiplayer. I've encountered a very small amount of connection issues and almost no lag, which is, once again, incredibly rare for a Switch game. And it still has the core appeal of the other games in the series. The monsters are unique, they look cool, and they're fun to fight. The gameplay loop is satisfying for a long time, and you're constantly getting stronger and stronger in a way that's really tangible. The weapons offer an incredible variety of playstyles and have quite robust movesets. This game doesn't have a gripping story or anything, and it does get grindy like every other Monster Hunter title after a while, which is why it's not higher. But I really enjoyed my time with this game. The fights were great, the core combat was excellent, and the online multiplayer is the best I've experienced on Nintendo Switch. Now, on to number 9. Number 9. It Takes Two. I've been a fan of Joseph Fares' games since Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons was first released. A Way Out was great as well, and I was really excited for this one. Thankfully, I was not disappointed. This game is a co-op puzzle platformer with a frankly absurd amount of cool ideas. I cannot believe how long this game is and how it stays fresh all throughout. It has 9 extremely distinct chapters, all packed with tons of unique obstacles to tackle. The co-op element is really well thought out and really well implemented, and the core gameplay mechanics, while simple, feel great. This game is also surprisingly gorgeous. The soundtrack is fairly forgettable, and I have some minor issues with the story. But if you like 3D platformers, I'd absolutely recommend you play this game. And I'm gonna move on now, so you can hopefully go in as fresh as I did and be blown away with the creativity on display here. Number 8. Shovel Knight: Pocket Dungeon. Shovel Knight is one of the most iconic indie games of all time, and one of my personal favorites. But I wasn't quite sure what to expect out of this spin-off. It seems so different in style and genre from the original, so I had my doubts that it'd be anything special. Thankfully, I was proven wrong. Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon is a bizarre fusion of match 3 puzzle games and roguelites that works far better than I would have expected. This game isn't too complicated. That short description really tells me pretty much everything there is to know, but it's very well executed. You can play as a huge variety of knights, both new and from the original, all of which have a unique skill, and most of which force you to approach each puzzle in a different way, giving this game lots of replayability. And the core puzzle elements are intuitive and satisfying no matter who you're playing as. The pixel art and soundtrack are sublime, as one would expect from the series. This game looks and sounds absolutely great, and playing it feels great. The game is not perfect. I wish there was greater variety in items you could collect on each run, and I wish it was a little harder. But it's extremely unique, extremely charming, and extremely fun. Now, on to number 7. Number 7. Tales of Arise. I have very fond memories of playing Tales of titles like Tales of Symphonia back in the day. I'd say there's a pretty strong chance I wouldn't be making videos like this today had I never been introduced to the series. Sadly, it's been on a bit of a decline for a good while now. It was in desperate need of a reboot of sorts. So, when Arise was announced, I was ecstatic. Did it live up to my expectations? Mostly. It has a fair amount of flaws. But this is a great jumping off point for the Tales of series going forward, and I still really enjoyed my time with it. The graphics of Tales of Arise demonstrate one of the largest leaps I've ever seen between series entries, especially between games on the same hardware. This game looks absolutely great. It has a great art style and some really neat designs. The soundtrack of Tales of Arise is also probably my series' favorite. Some of the themes are truly excellent. I've always enjoyed Tales of music, but this is the first game that has some of its songs stuck in my head for months after I finished their games of origin. It might just be my favorite Motoi Sakuraba soundtrack. The combat feels better than ever before. It keeps a fast-paced, combo-focused nature that's vital to the series' identity, but it feels a lot smoother and a lot faster. And the character writing is pretty exceptional. This is one of the greatest casts I've seen in an RPG recently. Sadly, there are a couple of big problems preventing me from putting this near the top of the list. There is a clear drop in quality at the halfway point, and a lot of the enemies are damage sponges that don't react to hits the way I'd like them to. Still, the second half of the game is far from bad. This is a must-play for JRPG fans. Now, on to number 6. Number 6. Persona 5 Strikers. If you had told me before 2021 that I'd be putting a Warriors spin-off of the latest mainline Tales of entry, I don't think I would have believed you. However, Persona 5 Strikers really surprised me. This game feels more like a full-on sequel than a spin-off, with the soundtrack, story, visuals, and RPG mechanics all stronger than I ever would have expected. The combat here isn't just typical Dynasty Warriors combat. It's genuinely equal parts Persona 5 combat and Musou combat. You take on big groups of enemies all at once, but it has the stats, levels, and weaknesses necessary to have the depth required of an RPG. It still gets repetitive at points, but it's by far the most engaging Musou combat I've ever seen. The story of this game is pretty fanservice-y at its core. It's somewhat reminiscent of the typical beach episode or summer vacation OVA present in many anime series. However, it has some great plot beats, some great character moments, legitimate character development, and some amazing newly introduced characters. Zenkichi and Sophie are genuinely some of the Phantom Thieves' greatest members. The visual style and flair of the original Persona 5 is still here in full force. It's everything any fan could want. And the soundtrack. It may just be better than the original Persona 5's already outstanding soundtrack. It has some great remixes and a lot more new songs than I expected, most of which surpassed even the best the original game had to offer. The combat and story aren't quite as engaging as they are in the original Persona 5, but they come much closer than I could have expected. Persona 5 Strikers is a must-play for any Persona 5 fan. Now, on to number 5. Number 5. Bowser's Fury. When I first went into Bowser's Fury, tacked onto the Super Mario 3D World port, I was not expecting much. I haven't exactly been pleased with the amount of additional content present in the vast majority of Nintendo Switch ports of Wii U games, nor was I very impressed with the Bowser add-ons in the latest Mario and Luigi RPG games. Thankfully, I was very pleasantly surprised here. Bowser's Fury is essentially just a mini 3D Mario game. We're using the basic engine of 3D World by creating a huge level for you to explore with lots of clever ideas. In Bowser's Fury, you explore Lake Lapcat, one gigantic map that houses many smaller maps of sorts with unique objectives. It's a structure unlike anything I've ever seen before, and it mostly works. The core objectives are pretty much what you'd expect from a 3D Mario game, if a bit more formulaic. Still, they're a blast to complete, and Mario is a blast to move around with. The world is beautiful, and the soundtrack is excellent. The new Bowser design is one of my favorites as well. I do have some minor issues with the game. Having Fury Bowser pop up every so often gets old, and the objectives do grow a bit stale by the end. However, this game provided multiple hours of top-notch 3D Mario content, and that's far more than I expected from it. I still enjoyed it all the way through, and it's one of the games I most frequently revisited throughout the year. Now, on to number 4. Number 4. Everhood. A friend of mine recommended I play this little indie game called Everhood when it was on sale, and I thought I'd give it a shot since it was so cheap. I hadn't heard much about it, so I wasn't expecting too much when I dove in, and frankly, I was blown away. Everhood is a bizarre fusion of rhythm game, RPG, and action game. It is an RPG-esque overworld, but every battle is a fast-paced rhythmic duel. It's kind of like reverse Guitar Hero, where you have to dodge the notes instead of hit them. This system is incredibly unique and incredibly fun. As one would expect from a rhythm game ranked so highly, its soundtrack is superb. It has tons of variety, it all feels great to fight to, and a lot of it has been stuck in my head for a good 6 months now. The pixel art in this game looks really nice, and the visual effects this game utilizes are absolutely insane. I've never seen a game do things so crazy with its aesthetic. The story and characters in this game are also excellent, though I won't detail them here as I feel this game is best experienced if you go in blind. Ultimately, this game is incredibly fun, incredibly charming, and incredibly fresh. I don't know why more people aren't talking about it. I'd recommend it to just about anyone, though I'd especially recommend it to Undertale fans. It has a lot of similarities, and I'd argue it even surpasses it in many ways. Now, on to number 3. Number 3. Shin Megami Tensei 5. Shin Megami Tensei 5 is the first console SMT game in quite a while, and it absolutely delivers in pretty much every way you could hope. The combat is incredible. This is easily the best turn-based combat system I've ever seen. It's snappy, it's fast, and it's difficult. It really pushes the player to use every mechanic available to them. But that makes victory incredibly satisfying. This is one of the only RPGs I've ever played where I had to regularly use buffs and debuffs to succeed. It's a strong contender for the best looking Switch game. It has a gorgeous art style that's very well executed. I particularly love the design of the main character, the Nahobino. The soundtrack isn't packed with earworms or anything, but it does contain lots of atmospheric music that really adds to the game's vibe. The story's in a similar spot. The characters are frankly pretty weak and the core conflict isn't particularly gripping. But every cutscene just has this bizarre mood that fits perfectly. And the exploration is excellent, which I really wasn't expecting from an SMT game. I was constantly discovering useful stuff and beautiful scenery throughout the game, and I always felt like going off the beaten path was worth my time. This is one of the best turn-based RPGs I've ever played. The only issue I have with it is its frankly egregious DLC, though it's absolutely not necessary and I felt the game was well balanced without using any of it. If you're an RPG fan, you need to give this game a shot. Now, on to number 2. Number 2. Metroid Dread. Metroid is a decades-old series, packed with lots of great, genre-defining titles. And even still, I can confidently say Metroid Dread is the very best of them all. Pretty much every Metroid game has a great world to explore, and a great atmosphere bolstered by its soundtrack and visuals. And Dread is absolutely no different. Even just on this front, I'd probably say Dread is the best Metroid title. The level design is truly excellent. However, most other Metroid games feel pretty clunky. That's where Dread vastly differs. Dread plays like an extremely tight, fast, and responsive action game, and not only would it be a blast to play in a vacuum, it also fits Samus's character very well. New areas like the slide really add to this game's mobility and make the overall combat and traversal a lot more engaging. Ultimately, this game is gorgeous, it's extremely fun, it has a rich atmosphere, it has an interesting story, especially for longtime Metroid fans, and it has genius level design. This is an absolutely top-notch Metroidvania. But, there's still one game that I believe is just a little better, and that game is... Number 1. Neo: The World Ends With You. The original The World Ends With You on DS is an absolute classic, and one of my favorite childhood games. So I was excited for the sequel when it was announced, though I have to admit I was a bit wary. The great gameplay of the original really wouldn't work on anything without 2 screens, as demonstrated by its port to mobile and Switch, and that Switch port left me feeling disappointed with its control scheme and new content. Those fears ended up being totally unjustified. Neo Twooey surpasses the original in just about every way. The art style, visuals, and soundtrack are frankly unbelievably good. There's nothing out there like it, and they're all executed masterfully. This is easily my favorite game soundtrack of all time. The story is very engaging, and the cast of characters is varied, deep, and relatable. The combat is a blast, and it maintains the core theme of teamwork from the original while doing a great job of adapting it to work on modern hardware. Genuinely, I have nothing negative to say. I was blown away by every single aspect of this title. Neo: The World Ends With You is absolutely my favorite game of the year, and it might just be my favorite game ever made. Thank you guys for watching this video, I really appreciate it. If you liked it, I'd also really appreciate it if you liked, commented, hit the notification bell, and or subscribed. I'd also recommend you check out some of my other content like my ranking of the pre-Dread 2D Metroid games. If you want to see additional updates about the channel, follow me on Twitter or Instagram or join my Discord server. All linked in the description below. Thank you all for watching, have a great rest of your day.